3. Okay, shalom, shalom, everybody. I have, again, my very special guest, Timothy Holmseth. Unfortunately, I've had to take down about 3 of the 4 videos that I've made with him recently due to, well, we won't talk about him in this interview. We have more important things to talk about. But the 4th one, the most recent interview that I did with him, which is entitled "The Clinton Probe Leads Directly to Pence," that's still up for your viewing enjoyment. Timothy Holmseth, for those of you who don't know, because I know I've gotten a lot more subscribers since the last time I interviewed him, he is an amazing man. I consider him a modern-day hero. For many, many years, he has been on the front lines in exposing satanic pedophilia, child sex trafficking in all levels of government. He lives out there in Minnesota. He is and was an award-winning journalist, and he's literally been kicked out of being a journalist because of his stand against the child sex trafficking. And so he's basically independent now, reliant on donations to keep himself going. But he's just done an incredible job. And I asked him to come on today because he has recently done some articles about a young boy, Jacob Wetterling, who died back in the late 80s. And there was the official story that came out then, but then now there's the true story with a lot more implications involving this particular facet of child sex trafficking and satanic ritual pedophilia and child sex sacrifice. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Tim, and I'd like him to just sort of start off by telling us about the quote-unquote official story of Jacob Wetterling, and then to talk about what the truth is. Go ahead, Tim.
Okay, thanks a lot, Daniel. Hey, nice to be with you again. And before I even start, I'm going to tell everybody, yes, I move around a lot because I got a problem with my spine. So I'll get that out of the way. So I'm not being deceptive if I'm moving around. Yeah, Jacob Wetterling. Yeah, in 1989. So there might be some of your viewers may remember this, but this is actually getting back there a ways where might have been little kids that when this happened, their parents probably didn't tell them about it, But in 1989, a little boy from Minnesota named Jacob Irwin Wetterling, he was kidnapped off the side of the road while walking with his brother and a friend into town to get a movie. Well, they were on their way back from a Tom Thumb store where they got a movie, and he was kidnapped at gunpoint. So from the very beginning, from minute number 1, they knew he was kidnapped because he was kidnapped by a man with a mask who told all the boys to lay down. He only took one. He took Jacob. And it immediately exploded into the media, which is kind of interesting now as we begin to learn what was really going on in our country and how the media has been, used and manipulated and fake. So, but it instantly was it was all over the television back then, and that's 1989. So the internet was like, if it was around, it was definitely in its infancy. So everything was still television back then, and but everybody was looking for Jacob Wetterling. His picture was everywhere. This was a huge case, and for the next almost 30 years, it just went unsolved. They said, "Oh, we couldn't solve it. They couldn't solve it." Well, that's the official version. Is ultimately in, I think it was 2017.
2016. It was
16. Yeah. When they said that they solved it. Yeah. American public media was about ready to put a podcast out called In the Dark. And it was going to expose things about the Wetterling case that the Stearns County Sheriff's Office in Minnesota didn't want anybody to know. And so they suddenly solved it. And here's how they solved it. They had a local man named Danny Heinrich. He was like a local pervert, just your creepy old pervert that looked at pictures, and they charged him with child pornography. He was charged with I got a pregnant daughter, so I'm going to look at this just to make sure she's okay. Okay. Daniel Heinrich, he was like a local pervert, and they charged him with, I think, 25 counts of child pornography. And then what they did was they had Danny Heinrich pled guilty to killing Jacob on the condition that he wouldn't be charged with the murder, and they took 24 of the 25 child pornography counts off. So basically, they just bribed him or to say, just say you killed Jacob. And the other thing that he did, and this is where they got snagged, Danny Heinrich led them to Jacob's body. My phone's doing something stupid. I gotta just make sure it ain't my daughter. Okay. So Danny Heinrich led, this is how they played it out. Danny Heinrich led investigators to a rural area in Painesville, Minnesota, to a site where he told them that he buried Jacob. He said that he, I'll tell you what he said so everybody gets the full picture. He said he abducted Jacob, and on the same night, he said he took him out to this area by this gravel pit. And he said that, I'm going to say it, because in order to see the ridiculousness of this fake confession that he did in the courtroom, he said he took him out there. He said they both took their clothes off. He said then they both masturbated. Jacob's 11. He's a grown man. He says, okay, so he said they both masturbated. Then Jacob said he was cold, so he told Jacob to put his clothes back on. And Heinrich said then he got his gun out and he was going to shoot Jacob. And he told Jacob to turn around so he could shoot him in the back of the head when the little boy wasn't looking at him. This is what he said. And he said, I told him to turn around because I had to take a leak. I'll just let that sink in for a second. You know, as if he now, that's how ridiculous it was. They just masturbated together, but now don't look at me. I have to go to the bathroom. So this is the ridiculous story. Then he says he shot Jacob, and then he says that he buried him in this hole. He dug a grave. I won't go through the whole thing, but he led them to that area. And when they got, I mean, this was real. I mean, I got the BCA files. There's a crime scene photos like crazy. I got them all. And they found a shirt that I think it said Wetterling on the back. And they found bones and teeth. When they found that, they splattered it out in the fake news. It was all over the place. Wetterling, you know, case solved. They made this big thing out of it. But a Wetterling researcher named Julia Trimp and who was working with another woman named Diane Muehlbauer. Diane Muehlbauer is actually the woman who solved the Wetterling case. Julie Trimp, I think it was Julie that noticed, she read the search warrant, and the search warrant, hidden in the search warrant, it said, later examination of the bones and teeth revealed that the bones and teeth were not human. Bingo. It wasn't Jacob. It was somebody took animal bones, mixed animal bones in with Jacob's shirt, dug it. This is the cops. This was the police that did that. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're all in on it. So, but nonetheless, the fake stream media, they don't take it back. They don't tell the public about that, you know? So that's the solved case. They claim it was solved because Danny Heinrich led them to the body, which there was no body. It was animal bones. It's right. It says right in the warrant. And he confessed to a crime that he didn't commit, and he never got charged with the murder. So the whole thing was fake.
It was all set up to hide about what really, really happened. So they led him to these bones. The bones are actually animal bones. It was all covering up the truth. Now, you wrote an article about a week ago called National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, a Front for International Child Trafficking, Hiding Jacob Wetterling Evidence. I'm just going to read just a few lines here. It says, Is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the NCMEC, an organization truly dedicated to locating missing children? Or is it a harvesting operation set up by international child traffickers to receive leads and information for a central intelligence database, which is used to monitor cases and avoid exposure to their black operations? Richard Leonard, the senior forensic case manager for NCMEC, was provided a trove of information regarding the kidnapping and murder of Jacob Wetterling. Leonard received audio of an eyewitness to Jacob's murder who stated Jacob's father, Jerry Wetterling, was at the ritual sacrifice murder. And remember Jacob saying, Daddy, Daddy, don't. Patty Wetterling is listed as a child's advocate for NCMEC. Records which have long since been in the possession of the NCMEC are being sent by Timothy Charles Holmseth to FBI Christopher Director Wray and U.S. Attorney General Matthew Whitaker. Patty Wetterling of the NCMEC and the mainstream media have never addressed recorded confessions of Jacob's kidnapper captured on tape, the recording of a cult member that attended Jacob's sacrifice, or a search warrant record that distinctly states the lab determined the teeth and bones found supposed to be Jacob turned out not even to be human. And then you have the pictures there as well. So basically, you've discovered that the official story is, and I want to make sure I'm getting these details right. So we have the father of Jacob Wetterling, and then Patty Wetterling. Is that his mother?
Yes.
So we basically have the father and mother who were involved in a satanic ritual abuse where they sacrificed their own child. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. Jerry is named as being there. And by the way, Daniel, you're referring to a story that's up on timothycharlesholmseth.com. If they go to that story you're talking about, you're also going to see a picture of Jerry Wetterling standing with, two little boys. I'm not going to say who they are, but I've covered their faces. They both have shirts on that say, one of them says, "You want a pizza, me?" And the other one says something about friends or temporary pizzas for life or something. He's got pizza shirts. He's advertising the kids. People look at that.
What kind of connection do these Wetterlings have with the CIA, with the government, with all this stuff? Are there connections between them, or?
Because of what happened with the fake solving of the case, that was interesting, because when that happened, that meant the files had to be released. After like 30 years, these files that they were keeping hidden had to be released. And of course, Jerry and Patty Wetterling filed a lawsuit and tried to keep files sealed. But anyway, the state files got released. The FBI still has their files. Okay, so I have all the state files. Me and Diane Milbauer and Julia Tremp, we began to go through, systematically going through all the leads and everything that they had. And there were leads in here. They received a tip from a police officer. I think he was in Baudette, Minnesota. And he told them that he had a lead that Jacob, I think he said Jacob was at the St. John's University behind a big door. This was a police officer trying to tell him where he was at. But one of the more compelling ones was, this again came from a police officer from like a neighboring town. He sent a lead in because they were still looking for Jacob. And he said that he gave a bunch of information about a man who he knew, who he said was involved in the Council of 13. And he suggested that this had to do with the Council of 13. Now, for your viewers out there, you can Google that. You're talking about basically like the Rothschilds. So this wasn't just your everyday sacrifice. I mean, there is no every one of them is important, but this one was, I think, special because it led to a lot of things. Like Patty Wetterling ended up running for Congress several times. By the way, her campaign, she received a campaign donation back then from Barack Obama. Like, when you start going through this, they're all connected.
Wow.
But yeah, so this was a ritual sacrifice. If you go to that page that Daniel was reading off of, you're also going to see a Bitchute video I put up there. You're going to hear a short clip of a man who was at the sacrifice, and you're going to hear him talking. But you're actually not hearing the whole thing. Attorney General Whitaker will be hearing the whole thing, and there's a lot of stuff that we have not published. We don't want to compromise. We don't get people killed, but it's all going to the Attorney General. If folks can go on there, you can listen to it. This is all real.
It's unbelievable to me. So it's just, I mean, it's not unbelievable. It's
yeah, I know what you mean.
The fact that the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, I mean, here's this organization, right, that's specifically targeted toward trying to help this situation of helping child sex trafficking, and what they are is a giant net basically covering for satanic pedophilia.
And
go ahead.
Well, like I had long since known about the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the longer I worked in this business, if you call it that, I began to learn that that's what they do. So all these agencies that say, hey, we'll help you find a child, something adoption agencies and New World Adoptions or National Center or Kid Finders or the ones that say they'll take the leads. Don't call the leads into the sheriff's office, call them into, I forgot the name of it, but it's what they're doing is they set them up as fronts, and then they sit there and they're like the gatekeepers of the information. And when a good lead comes in, they'll know about it. Patty Wetterling is on the board of directors or a child advocate with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Meanwhile, Diane Muehlbauer has recordings of people who were at the scene of Jacob's kidnapping. She got the guy on tape. Diane Muehlbauer, a bail bondsman from St. Cloud, Minnesota, worked with a private investigator. He's just recently deceased. His name was Larry Pert with Pert & Associates in St. Cloud. She worked with Larry Pert and a police officer from Wilmer. They used the sheriff's office wiring equipment for Diane to get wired. And Diane recorded a man named Michael Boehner. And he's on my website too. If you go to my Jacob Wetterling link, you can hear all this. And he told her that he was at the scene on the side of the road with a man named Lou Coles. And he said, Lou Coles is the one that took Jacob. And he describes him taking him, dragging him to the car with a knife to his throat. And he said Jacob was fighting and punching and trying to get away. And Diane was wired, and they got all this on tape. And the Stearns County Sheriff's Office back then, they hid this. They buried it. They were playing all kinds of razzle-dazzle games to try to keep, because they did not want to solve this case. I also have, I can't say this, I can't confirm this. I'm not going to try to confirm it. But I also have heard that the sheriff of Stearns County may have actually been at Jacob's ritual. So imagine trying to solve a case if the sheriff is there. I'll say his name too. It's Jim Kostreba. Come on, Jim. He ain't gonna sue me, believe me, man.
Hey guys, Timothy Holmseth is naming names, and they don't sue him. They don't sue him because they don't want him to file for discovery. They know that they're guilty. So here we have the sheriff. Okay, we have Jacob's parents who were involved in the satanic ritual sacrifice connected to the Council of 13. We have Jacob's mom, who's been part of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which basically is a front for child sex trafficking. And so now, and this is the next article I want that Tim has already made reference to, that what I want to talk about, is that he just wrote an article entitled U.S. Attorney General Whitaker to Receive Jacob Wetterling Evidence. Timothy Charles Holmseth is preparing a presentation of evidence and documents to be delivered to FBI Director and Office of the Attorney General of the United States. The complaint will provide FBI Director Christopher A. Wray and U.S. Attorney Matthew G. Whitaker's office's evidence that show there's an organized secret society deeply embedded into state and federal government, as well as law enforcement in Minnesota and Wisconsin and elsewhere, that is committing crimes against children and humanity at unspeakable levels. The presentation will include evidence regarding, but not limited to, the kidnapping and ritual sacrifice murder of Jacob Irving Wetterling. An abundance of evidence exists to initiate federal investigations and prosecutions pursuant to, and this is what I like. So now you list these executive orders that President Trump, our beloved president, has actually put into effect. So listen to this, guys, because I'm still getting maybe 30 to 40% of my subscribers saying that President Trump is doing nothing about this. Listen to what Timothy Holmseth has listed here. On February 9th, 2017, there was a presidential executive order on enforcing federal law with respect to transnational criminal organizations and preventing international trafficking. On December 21st, 2017, which I've talked about this one a lot, there was an executive order blocking property or persons involved in serious human rights abuse or corruption. On October 11th, 2018, President Donald J. Trump is taking action to end human trafficking. On January 9th, 2019, President Donald J. Trump is fighting to eradicate human trafficking. Over and over and over again, we see President Trump waging a war against these satanic pedophiles. So, the evidence is clear that we have the first president basically in history that's taking this stuff on. But like Timothy Holmseth is showing just in this story here with Jacob Wetterling, we're talking about a swamp that is embedded on all levels of government. When you have Jacob's parents, the Council of 13, which involves the Rothschilds, local sheriffs and police officers, all working in conjunction along with the state and even federal level, that's quite an enemy to take on, and this is what President Trump is having to take on. Go ahead, Timothy.
Well, no, thank you for that. You described the situation well, because what this really does come down to is those executive orders. I've had information about child kidnappings and a CIA child trafficking ring and a baby selling operation. I knew all their names. I knew how they were doing it. And something so interesting, and I guess I've never really pointed this out, but I'll do it here today on your show, Daniel. I did the case of Haley Cummings, and that's when I became an FBI witness. Do you know where I ultimately was told Haley ended up? This just occurred to me. Mexico. They took Haley into Mexico. Oh, but we don't need a wall, right? President Trump is absolutely right when he's talking. You see, when he puts up that wall, he's basically shutting down a business. It's the biggest business in the world. That's why they don't want him to do it.
Right.
Now, regarding the files that I'm going to be sending to Attorney General Whitaker and Director Wray, I hope that people can understand that I'm not playing games. I got a bullseye on my head. These people want to kill me. They've wanted to kill me for 10 years. They have put me in jail over and over. I don't always know how long I'm going to live. This is not a game to me. And so I take this very seriously, and I have the utmost respect for our Attorney General and for our FBI Director and our President. And what I'm doing is I'm preparing the files, and some of these the world's never heard. I'm preparing them in very easy. I'm preparing a presentation to show what happened to Jacob Wetterling. And believe me, if this evidence was presented to a jury, I believe there'd be a guilty verdict. But the one thing that's for sure, even just simply by what we've already talked about, if you go to that timothycharlesholmseth.com and you look at that story that Daniel read off of, you can see the search warrant. It's up. You can see that they never found Jacob's body. So this is literally like a fake news story. When President Trump calls them fake news, that's exactly what they are. And they all, Daniel, you and I both know that really what they're really needing to keep hidden is the stuff with the children. Ultimately, they know that that's when mom and dad and grandpa and everybody's coming out with the pitchforks. They won't live. I think they're actually having to try to do this slowly so people like Nancy Pelosi aren't hanging from a light post. I think that they're trying to, stop us from descending into a banana republic type of thing. Because what these people are doing to these children, for instance, with Jacob, now this is like, I'm not saying this happened, but evidence that I've seen and things that I have to consider because of the evidence I've seen. One of them is they may have cut Jacob's arms off while he was alive. And another one is they may have embalmed him with embalming fluid while he was alive.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
These people
I know.
Sick.
You look at the picture of that little boy. And the witness said that the guy that was there, he was standing there. And this, you'll hear the one guy say, well, what was your job? What did you do? And he just goes, I gave him what he needed. Which I think what he was saying is he was giving Jerry Wetterling whatever tool he needed, whatever they were doing to this boy. And he said that Jacob said, Daddy, Daddy, don't.
I can't even, it's just hard for me to even comprehend that parents, a mom and dad, could do this to their own child. But I guess people that are
they're so unlike us. They're nothing like us. They're not.
Well, this was exactly what happened when I interviewed the woman who was molested below Oral Roberts University and saw men like Kenneth Copeland doing cannibalization, that her own father, who was actually part of the Freemasons, that he regularly prostituted out his daughter, even when she was really little. And of course, when her family moved close to Oral Roberts University, her father was eagerly allowing his little girl to be a part of these satanic ritual abuse sacrifices going on beneath ORU. Now, again, to me, it was so hard to comprehend. Like, how could a dad do this? And yet, the dad's motivation apparently was trying to get into higher levels of the Freemasonry or whatever. But yeah, these people who are part of these satanic cults, their mind has been so reprobated and so given over to the evil one that this is what they try to do to their children. And what's even more horrific, it's not just some sort of satanic cult on the fringes of society, but like in the case of Jacob Wetterling's mother, she's part of this huge, it's a federal organization, correct? The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Is that a federal? Yeah.
Well, they call themselves the National Center, but I don't, they're not a federal agency. I think they're private.
Right.
I think they're private.
They're just an organization that basically is a huge organization that is dedicated supposedly to locating missing children, but is really a harvesting operation. But obviously they're working in conjunction with elements of state, local, and even federal governments in order to be able to, the police and all this stuff covering things up. What's interesting is I wonder why, after 30 years of them sweeping it under the rug, they then decided to come out in 2016 with this false story where they're using bones, animal bones. I wonder what motivated that.
I sometimes wonder if it had the slow approach of Donald Trump. I just wonder if they saw, well, we got to try to pretend like this is solved before he becomes the president.
That makes a lot of sense.
Hey, they'd have gotten away with it had it not been for a woman named Diane Muehlbauer. Diane Muehlbauer in my opinion, this woman is an American hero. This is a woman who other women could look up to. If you see what she had done when she discovered, she was a bail bondsman, so she was learning things. And when she found out what happened, she literally started wearing a wire, and one by one, man, she got these people on tape talking about it. And she talked to prisoners on the phone. And this is back and she's using one of those tape recorder, it's much more handy. We got digital now, and she spent her own money to call these prisoners to keep getting them on tape because these guys that were talking about what they did. And, but anyway, that was all those years ago. For all these years, Diane kept trying to get this out. And I was the last, they contacted me because they saw my website and they saw that what I was doing. And I guess they saw that I was willing to just say, I'll come out and say it. And they got a hold of me, and we started working together. And I've made up my mind, and I believe that the Lord God is going to make sure that the people who did this are going to be brought to justice and punished for what they did to that little boy. I'm convinced of that. I know the presentation that I'm sending, and folks like you, Daniel, are giving me a platform to talk about it, so everybody gets to hear about it. That's actually the weapon that they held for decades. Was the media is the brainwashing tool. It is the mind control tool. That's how we broke their system. We broke it with the internet. We broke it with YouTube, with Twitter. We started talking to each other, and the Christians started talking to each other. And this is where we get, and this is where we're at.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Everything will be brought to light. That's what the Messiah said. Everything that's been hidden in darkness will be brought to light. So I want to go back to your statement about Obama and his connection to this whole thing. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, Patty Wetterling, she was suddenly thrust. you know, she suddenly became famous after her son Jacob vanished. She's all over with the Wetterling Foundation on the news, running her mouth. Pure evil. She's pure evil. But so then she ran for Congress several times, and good Lord, she didn't win. The interesting thing about Patty Wetterling is I was a news reporter in Roseau, Minnesota. That's way up there. It's like just about in Canada. And I was the news reporter there, and I interviewed Patty Wetterling when she was running for Congress. She came and met with me and sat down in my office. And I remember, it's just so interesting to me to think about that now. How naive I was then. I felt like I was sitting in the presence of some kind of royalty. Like I felt so bad for her. I thought, this is Jacob's mom. You know, I was like trying to make sure I had coffee for her, and she seemed like a little sweet woman, and I felt so bad for her. And now to think, and I still got the paper where I wrote the article and everything, you know. But to think that I was sitting there with a witch, and now I know, you know, like I got to see both sides of this evil thing. And so I don't know, that's just an interesting dynamic to the whole story for me. But yeah, she ran for Congress, and one of the few donations that she received was from a young senator, I think at the time, named Barack Obama.
Wow.
Man, they're all CIA. Obama was CIA. Patty Wetterling is, when you cut down to it, she's CIA. And if you cut down underneath CIA, it's just globalist Luciferianism, devil worshippers, child eaters, you know?
Well, that's what the CIA has been, a child sex trafficking front since its inception. And, you know, we know Obama is definitely involved in all this. I believe he has a vast child sex trafficking network to match the Clinton vast child sex trafficking network. And he's had, this is what gives him his millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. This is just so, I mean, obviously it's tragic what happened to Jacob. But I really like what you said in that it makes a lot of sense. What, you know, after 30 years, they'd swept this under the rug. They said, oh, it's unsolved. But then they come up with this bogus story involving animal bones and put it on this head of this so-called child molester, Danny Heinrich, because by late 2016, it was becoming very apparent that President Trump might actually win this thing. And so they're trying to get ahead of the curve and trying to sweep this under the rug. It's unbelievable, because this would, even though this happened way back in 1989, we're talking about a woman who received donations from Obama. I mean, we're talking about connections that go as high as the Rothschilds and the Council of 13. We're talking about sheriffs and police departments that actively covered this up for decades. The amount
Patty Wetterling,
incredible.
Patty Wetterling was, she was hanging around in the White House. I think I saw pictures of her with Bush. I'm not sure. It was one of the presidents. I mean, I think she was involved in some law. You know, yeah, I mean, when people step back and when this all comes out, everybody's going to like be going, oh, why didn't I see it? You know, it's going to be that Where's Waldo moment. Like, it was there the whole time. You know, they were all doing this together.
Right. And I just want to remind my audience again, because, again, we've gotten a lot of new subscribers since the last time I talked with Timothy Holmseth. This is not a left-right Republican Democrat thing. The satanic pedophiles are on both sides of the aisle. So George W. Bush and Barack Obama, they're on the same team, guys. They're on the same team. They both promoted satanic pedophilia. They're both deep state. And so the reason they hate President Trump, if you go back to President Trump, but long before he was president, back in 2012, he tweeted very clearly that pedophiles should have swift justice and the death penalty. So they all knew, whether it was George W. Bush, whether it's Barack Obama, whether it's liberal Democrat, whether it's international cabals, they all knew that if this guy, Donald J. Trump, wins the presidency, we're dealing with a man who not only would go after pedophiles, but wants the death penalty for them. So this is what it's all about. This is what it's all about. It's them wanting to keep their vast satanic pedophile network going, and they want to take out President Trump because he is waging a war against it. And this Jacob Wetterling case is just another piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, and when folks are watching this battle play out about the wall, and people get sucked into believing that this is about immigration or does Trump hate Mexicans, or no, it's about their ability to freely traffic children for sex, for organ harvesting, for their blood, and then you got your guns and your drugs. It's their business, and it all goes back and forth over that border. And Trump is saying, we're going to shut this business down. They'll collapse. I mean, our society is going, you're going to see when that wall goes up, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel a change around you. I mean, you're going to see some people be arrested. That the phase of the arrest is going to go on, but I think we're going to feel a change in our world. And boy, I'm telling you, and I mean, I'm not a preacher. That's your job, Dan. But people better, I think we're going to get another chance, honestly. I believe God's going to give us another chance, but it's coming to an end. He's not going to keep letting us do this, live in a society like this where we're letting people eat our babies. So I hope that I want people to find Jesus Christ, as many, because that's where the answer is. And amen. I don't preach well, but I found Jesus Christ. He saved me, and he brought me to where I'm standing. And I hope if anything, if I can, Daniel, if I could pull this off with what I'm sending to the Attorney General and the FBI, if between me and the media sources that I have, like you and others, Sarah Westall, others who are helping, if we could pull this off, I hope that somebody can look and go, Timothy was right. Timothy was right. And Timothy said, Jesus Christ brought him to where he was at. Because I have nothing to do with this, man. I'd have been laid out dead a long time ago if Jesus Christ wasn't standing beside me in my weakest moments and God wasn't looking out for me, man. I'm nothing.
Amen. I know on past interviews I've gotten some snide comments of saying, well, if Timothy Holmseth really was truthfully exposing these people, he would have been dead. I say, yeah, you're right. He would have been dead, but he's not, because the Messiah of Israel is protecting him. They tried. I am supposed to be dead. They tried. And they tried. I was supposed to die in their jail. And they will continue to fail, because Timothy and myself and many others out there, what we've chosen to do is we've placed our faith in Yahshua, in Jesus Christ of Nazareth. He's our shield. He's our strong tower. He's our buckler. He's the horn of our salvation. He's the one who's protecting us. He gets all the glory, and we're very, very thankful. And of course, people say, well, how do you think? Why do you think President Trump, when no other president has been able to succeed at this, why is he going to succeed? Well, I'll tell you why. Because we have saints like never before all across this nation and the world praying for President Trump. It's never happened like this before, and we're praying for him and praying for him and praying for him, and he has that divine protection as well. So those people out there who want to be critical or who want to say, yeah, right, you know what? you can continue to believe that way, because those of us who've chosen to place our faith in the Messiah of Israel, in Yahshua of Nazareth, who was born in Bethlehem, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, we know, Timothy knows, we know that he's the one protecting us and guarding us and helping us wage this battle. And furthermore, if you're not covered in his blood and filled with the Spirit, you shouldn't even be in this battle, because Satan's just going to tear you apart and spit you out. That's what's going to happen to you. So it's very important that we stay armored up. Fiona Barnett understands that as well. She has a strong faith in the Messiah. Hallelujah.
Yeah, Fiona Barnett. There's another one who she put it all on the line and the way she was tortured and the things that happened to her. And, you know, there's people out on the internet, you know, witches that have been sent in to try to discredit Fiona, you know, and they're making up these crazy stories like, oh, she's a psychologist. And then she stole the stories from her SRA victims. And then and, you know, I watched Fiona's, her documentary. Candy Girl.
Candy Girl, uh-huh.
And she tells about that scene where they had these kids standing on a stage and they looked like they were hypnotized. These little kids, they're all standing there while they were doing this huge, I think it was a black mass or something. And she said, I think it was that freak. She said Bruce Spence, he was the goofy guy in Mad Max who flew the helicopter. She said Bruce Spence, one by one, this huge sword went up behind these kids who were standing there in a trance and beheaded them. And their head would fall and the other ones wouldn't move. And then made her, this other guy came over and picked up a head and made Fiona take a bite out of the face. And then you got people, basically witches who are being sent in by Satan just to make up stories about Fiona. Fiona Barnett is for real. So don't, you know, if anybody out there going, oh, geez, you know, don't follow the rumors. Get the Holy Spirit in you and it'll never lead you astray. If you don't have the Holy Spirit in you, you're always going to be kind of confused. It's like, oh, maybe I should go over here. Oh, wait a minute. What about that guy just said this? And I'm like, I've been doing this for 10 years, man. Like, to me, it's like reading a foreign language. I get a phone call and I know within 30 seconds if it's a shadow government operative trying to set me up or if it's a Christian. I mean, I've literally had people call me up. They're trying to arrange to meet me somewhere. And like, I know right away. And and on another occasion, I had a woman from California called me up and she said that she was sitting in where she was getting her car done. And she said, the Lord just told me that I need to send you some money. And lo and behold, you know what she did, man? She sent me $500. And that was a call that, like most of these people, I know when to hang up. But with her, there was things she wanted to tell me and there's things she wanted to talk about. But you definitely know they're for real when they send you money because, you know, I won't say the phrase, but money talks, BS walks, you know. And I'm so humbled when people do that because I'm like, people don't have that kind of money. That's a lot of money. You know, people have kept me going. Christians have kept me going for a long time. Like, and I know it's driving my local enemy who are trying to take me out. I know it drives them crazy because I'm sure they're thinking, how does he keep going? How does he pay his bills? He pays his car insurance and he pays his lights. And it's like the same with you. These bills have to be paid somehow. And I know it's driving them crazy, but it takes all of us. It takes all of us.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Timothy, I really appreciate you being on again. It's always a joy to interview with you. And guys, please consider supporting him. I will link to his website. He is completely independent. He's doing this on his own. I know Timothy Holmseth is for real, not only because of his faith in Messiah, but guys, he was an actual award-winning journalist, and he gave up his career. They forced him out of his career because he was willing to take a stand and expose this child sex trafficking, and he's been doing this for years. So I ask that you guys would please help support him and take care of him. He's been through way more harassment than anything I've had to endure. I have trolls here and there on the internet, but that's nothing compared to having your house raided and being thrown in jail and all this stuff that he's had to go through. So please consider helping him out. Tim, I want to leave you with any closing remarks that you might have before we end the interview.
Well, nothing really, I guess. Just I am letting everybody know, like I did in my press release, and I really appreciate you giving me the coverage to your 50-some thousand followers, that I am sending this in to the United States Attorney General, and I will I'll document it. I'll be sending it, you know, like registered mail. And in time, people will hear and see what I send. There's stuff in here that nobody's ever heard or seen. But I'm telling everybody that it is being sent in. I am going to prove what happened to Jacob Wetterling, and the guys at the top are going to know. I think they already do know. I'm just starting to push the issue a little bit, you know. But I'll be showing everybody. Everybody will eventually get to see what's on this disc that I'm sending in, and so it's something to look forward to. And I would invite people to go to my website. Everything there is free. I don't even use ads. TimothyCharlesHolmseth.com, and you know, read what I got. There's a lot of interesting stuff that I'm covering, and the latest one, and I won't go into it beyond saying Jamie Kloss. The case of Jamie Kloss that's sweeping the news right now. Just it's not what you think. And Patty Wetterling's involved in it. Patty Wetterling's involved in it. So they're throwing every junk ball at us they can, Daniel. They're throwing every junk ball they can.
Yeah, I know.
Fake.
When I was down in San Diego, I experienced more attacks than I've ever experienced in my life. But
you know,
the truth will win out, and light will overcome darkness, and the Messiah's blood is more powerful than all of these satanic minions. So
I had an interesting thought, at least it was interesting to me, about you. You know, I was watching you do your preaching down there, and I'm watching you, so I really started thinking about what you're doing, and I thought, you know, everybody's ignoring you, pretending like, and it started to occur to me like, no, they're just pretending to ignore them. They're standing around there listening. And I thought, what Daniel does it make a difference or not? And I started thinking about it, trying to process that. And then, you know, I was watching you, and you're going in, as it said in Jeremiah, you yelled out a Bible verse. And I thought, you know what? I'll bet you all these yahoos that are standing around with their phones are Googling Jeremiah. You know what I'm saying? I'll bet you they are. I'll bet you they're like, all right, I want to see what this Bible verse says. And it makes me wonder, like, how many seeds do you plant just by standing there and yelling? Like, because they got to be looking at you and thinking, you know, kind of like what they thought of Jesus in a way. Like, he's either crazy or he's telling the truth. It's got to be one or the other. But so it made me think, how many like, without telling anybody, because, you know, you wouldn't want to admit you're interested in what Preacher Dan was doing, but how many went back and like looked at a Bible verse and then got curious and looked at another Bible verse? And you know what I mean? I started thinking about it.
Well, the scripture says, by the foolishness of preaching, he's ordained to save men. So I don't think I'll ever know the actual results of the preaching until I stand before the Messiah. But yeah, I think there's a lot of things that you just don't see that later on will become manifest. I know one thing that I wasn't even expecting was just by being obedient, going down to San Diego and preaching is how I met, you know, this local cop who'd been a cop for 40 years, now an investigator, one of the top investigators in the San Diego area. And I was able to do an interview with him. Had no idea that I was going to be able to run into them, but they'd been subscribers for a month, and that they were sort of checking my channel out, not sure about me, but then we met. They actually tracked me down, and and we met, and I did an interview with them. I mean, that was, you know, that's not something that you can plan. That's just something as a step of obedience. So yeah, I think there is a lot of ripples that are happening because of the preaching. But it's the same with you, Timothy. I mean, you know, you're I think causing a lot of good out there too. In fact, it's almost as if when they took you off of YouTube and they took you off of Twitter, you're almost having a bigger impact now than you did then. Because now everyone's like, well, wait a minute, why did they take him off? And why are others having to promote him? And what's going on? So it's almost like you're having more of an impact.
Yeah, I know.
Before.
I know. It's like it's like, who was I? I had like 22,000 followers. What was I? Timothy Holmseth with my YouTube channel. What was I, changing the world? Why did I post it? I know why I did, because I was actually putting out factual information that I got through investigative reporting that was real. They had to get it off the web.
Right.
I mean, and I know who's behind these attacks, and I'm not going to say their names, but we are being attacked, and the attacks that were coming on me are now coming onto you too. And I've seen a bunch of stuff on the web about you, and being an investigator, I mean, I do this like it's second nature. And I started watching a couple of videos about you, and I was watching the information flow, and at first I was curious, and then I went, and then it just, the stuff they were saying about you, it was factually falling apart until it got to the point where I'm like, these are witches. Like, they were saying things about you that weren't true. Like, you're a murderer and a pedophile and a Satanist. I'm like, yeah, no. So
one thing that we prayed about because I have a prayer meeting that I lead every night, is that the accusations against me would become so absurd and so foolish and almost so cartoon-like that any reasonable person, whether they're spiritual or not, would just see this and be like, oh, this is just a joke. This is just a big joke. It can't possibly be true.
What?
And folks, again, you know, what Timothy Holmseth said earlier about having the Holy Spirit, if you don't have the Holy Spirit, if you're not pressing into Messiah, then you're going to be just led every which way. And I almost think that some of these trolls, some of these witches that are out there promoting this false information, witches and warlocks, because it's men and women, it's almost like God just allows them to filter out people. Maybe God doesn't want me to reach certain people because, frankly, he doesn't want you to know all this good information, because you're supposed to be deceived by these other trolls, and that's fine too. I know in every way things work out for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purposes. That's what Romans 8:28 says. So I'll leave it in his hands.
Yeah, I've suffered those attacks for a decade. I mean, I actually am a plaintiff in a multi-million-dollar federal lawsuit. To be honest with you, I learned a lot through my attorney, and I know a lot now about federal conspiracy law and defamation. And I was watching the thing. First Amendment goes a long way. We really can call each other names, and we can do a lot in our country, and that's good. But some of the things that were said about you, I'm like, holy cow, you better hope Daniel doesn't get a lawyer, or you just lost your house.
Yeah. By the way, guys, Timothy Holmseth has been in talks with me privately about how I might be able to file a defamation lawsuit against certain individuals on the internet who are saying things like I'm a murderer or that I'm a pedophile. And so I'm definitely looking into this. So maybe this will put a red flag alert to certain individuals out there on the internet who are promoting abjectly false stories. You know who you are. Get ready, because Timothy Holmseth knows a lot of stuff about how to file these defamation lawsuits, and he's
I'll tell you this, Daniel, the evidence has already been secured because somebody decided to say some crap about me. So I decided to secure the files, and I'll just say that I know attorneys, and this is an automatic win for you. There's no defense that can be made for some of the things that have been said. They're going to automatically lose. They cannot win.
Yeah.
And so they should stop.
Yeah. I appreciate that. All right, everybody. I thank you guys for listening and for watching. Of course, Timothy Holmseth has become a regular guest on my YouTube channel. And despite me having to take 3 of his videos down, 1 still remains. And now we got this one up. I plan to continue to have Timothy Holmseth as a regular guest because as you'll see when you go to his website, he's coming out with stories like every couple days. I mean, he's just boom, constantly working to expose the child sex trafficking that's going on in this nation. So I do plan to continue to have him as a regular guest on here. So thank you all for watching. Timothy, thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for having me. God bless you, man.
Thank you. Yah bless.